Good morning. I would like to thank President Tromley and the rest of the CNSC commissioners for the opportunity to speak. The title of my talk is The Cleantech Revolution. Its exponential growth has rendered Ontario's nuclear vision outdated. I'm an epidemiologist and adjunct professor at the University of Ottawa in the School of Epidemiology and Public Health, so we look at risk all the time. I've focused on the climate crisis and climate solutions for more than a decade. I was born in Deep River because my father was a nuclear physicist. My father took me to the Pickering nuclear plant when it was being built. While with Health Canada's head of birth defects research, I was contracted by, I think, ACL at the time to do a study of birth defects around the same Pickering plant. As a scientist, however, it is clear to me that it's time to move on. In the mid-2020s, we are reaching a tipping point in the largest transformation in energy production and usage ever. Few in Canada realize how profound this transformation is because we are deep in a Petrus state and surrounded with climate-denying conservative leaders. So Canada is a little slow off the mark. But this transformation is happening at breakneck speed, and it's undermining traditional approaches to energy generation. That leads me to the main points I would like to make today. First, SMRs are not a climate solution. They will be too slow to deploy and too costly to compete. Second, there are a range of far more cost-effective, quicker to deploy renewable paths for decarbonizing and expanding the Ontario grid. And these renewable paths will provide reliable 24/7 power that Canada can meet Ontario's expected increase in grid electricity demand in the future. Third, these proven paths to decarbonization will make the grid cleaner decades sooner and without the immediate and legacy risks, complications, and costs associated with SMRs and nuclear in general. Last June, the Institute of Energy, Economics, and Financial Analysis, a large think tank based in Cleveland, Ohio, put out a report on SMRs where they concluded SMRs are still too expensive, too slow to build, and too risky to play a significant role in transitioning from fossil fuels in the coming 10 to 15 years. Here is the evidence they provided to back those assertions. The cost escalation from the original cost estimates experienced with the only 3 SMRs in operation or under construction today in the world have been staggering. In China, 300% increase, in Russia, 400% increase, and in Argentina, 700% increase in cost. Due to the short time I have to speak, I will not be addressing details of each graph, but rather pointing out evidence highlights and implications. However, everyone has the slides, and I would be glad to discuss any of the evidence in more detail during or after the session. The 4 proposed United States SMRs have all experienced escalating cost estimates. The Volt 384 on NuScale doubling in estimated cost, the X-Energy and G Hitachi tripling to quadrupling in estimated cost. I'll turn to the evidence on the construction times. For the 3 SMRs in operation in yellow and the 11 new nuclear builds worldwide. For each project, the shorter bars are the projected completion time at or near the start of nuclear construction. They range from 3 to 7 years. The tall bars are the actual or currently projected times for completion. They range from 9 to 18 years, generally a doubling or tripling of the estimate at time construction began. These data led the IEEFA to conclude the rhetoric around small modular reactor advocates is loud and persistent. This time will be different because the cost overruns and schedule delays that have plagued large reactor construction projects will not be repeated with the new designs. But the few SMRs that have been built or have been started paint a different picture, one that looks startlingly similar to the past. Significant construction delays are still the norm, and costs have continued to climb. I'd like to turn now to renewable energy. The contrast in costs and implementation between SMRs and renewable sources of electricity could not be more stark. Cleantech costs have fallen rapidly. Over the last decade, offshore wind costs have dropped 70%, onshore wind 60%, solar 76%, and battery costs 79%. Onshore wind and solar are now competitive with just the marginal costs of generating electricity with fossil fuels. These cost reductions have led to exponential growth in yearly renewable sales. Global solar generation has been doubling every 2 to 3 years and battery storage every year. Through the rest of this decade, the growth in clean tech sales is projected to accelerate at a remarkable rate. Sales per year for solar in 2030 are projected to be at least 3 times what they were in the bumper year of 2024, and battery sales are projected to be 5 to 8-fold the sales in 2024. The favorable economics of Cleantech are reflected in the fact that 96% of new U.S. grid capacity in 2024 was clean, renewable power. Here's a very exciting example of what's possible. Since March 2024, there have been 100 days in California where wind, water, and solar have provided all of the grid electricity for the state at some point in the day. This slide shows May 25th, 2024. I don't know if people remember where they were that day, but wind, water, and solar provided all the grid energy between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Not bad, considering California is the 5th largest economy in the world and may soon be a Canadian province. So here's the crux of the matter. Ontario has a range of electricity options, the lowest cost being energy efficiency, the first bar on the left. Next, a range of renewable options, solar, wind, batteries, and nuclear rebuilds. Finally, gas peaker and nuclear being the most expensive on the right at 22.7 and 24.4 cents per kilowatt hour. How many of the 5.5 million Ontario households will choose 24 cent per kilowatt hour electricity from gas peaker and SMRs over 8 to 12 per kilowatt hour energy from renewables? And how many of the 700,000 Ontario businesses would choose 24% over 8 to 12% electricity? And with a show of hands, how many of the esteemed commissioners and tenacious technical staff that are present there today would choose the more expensive option? No hands up. Now, that's exactly what my preliminary modeling suggested would be. Because nuclear takes so long to build or refurbish, gas peaker plants will increasingly be filling in the electrical demand gap. By 2030, we had gas use down to 4% in 2017, but by 2030, it's estimated that Ontario will be using 25% of the electricity in Ontario will be provided by fossil gas. This is simply unacceptable and irresponsible at a time when there is an unfolding climate catastrophe, and unacceptable at a time when Canada is committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. Furthermore, results of recent satellite monitoring of methane releases in the production and distribution of natural gas demonstrate that natural gas peaker plants are often worse for the climate than coal was. Here are 5 examples of how renewables in Ontario could be utilized to help meet the expected increase in electrical grid demand with dependable 24/7 power without new nuclear or an expansion of gas peaker plant use. Number 1, let's start with the cheapest option, energy efficiency. A switch to heat pumps in the 450,000 electric baseboard heated Ontario homes would reduce their electricity costs on average by $2,000 per year. As well, GHG pollution would be reduced, and there would be an increase in GDP of $16 to $18 billion. Finally, the initiative would create 100,000 person years of employment and be distributed well across the province. Number 2, Quebec has offered long-term contracts for electricity to Ontario at 5.3 cents per kilowatt hour. Not bad. Quebec's Northern Hydro Dam system is perhaps the largest, cheapest hydro storage source in the world. Ontario has 5 existing transmission interconnection corridors to Quebec. To address renewable intermittency, Ontario could utilize the Quebec Northern Hydro Dam system as cheap storage for Ontario excess renewable production, as Quebec is currently doing with their wind projects. Number 4, Ontario could recontract with expiring wind and solar contracts by 2035. This could provide an additional 15 terawatts of power available on the grid. Ontario could develop its vast offshore wind resources. In 2008, Ontario contracted the Helix Corporation to examine the potential for Ontario Great Lakes offshore wind farms. The report proposed 64 effective sites for wind parks, 5 to 10 kilometers offshore, that can meet all of Ontario's increased electrical demand. In conclusion, it's time for a renewables future in Ontario. Nuclear is not a climate solution, too slow, too expensive, with unique risks, as we're discussing for days here. The exponential growth of renewables has rendered Ontario's nuclear vision outdated. 3, there are significant opportunity and climate costs to pursuing an SMR gas peaker vision. 4, there are a range of far more cost-effective renewable paths for decarbonizing and expanding the Ontario grid with reliable 24/7 power to meet Ontario's expected increase in grid electricity demand. Thank you very much for your attention and letting me run over a minute or two.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for the very interesting presentation. I'll turn the floor over for questions, and we'll start with Commission Member Berube.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Johnson, for that outstanding review. It's probably one of the best I've seen in this particular field for a couple of years. So I want to thank you for pulling that information together, making it as succinct as possible. Unfortunately, one of the problems we have with the Commission is we do not have a mandate for economics. And so we have to focus on safety, security, protection of the environment, protection of people. So I'm gonna refer to your written summary here, and you refer to a report on small modular reactors, and the title I think is still too expensive, too slow, and too risky. Could you summarize the risky aspects of that report? I have not personally read it. Maybe you can give us some insights as to why you believe that might be the case.
Well, the concerns, of course, are everything to do with uranium mining, running of nuclear plants, and of course, dealing with the waste, which has a very long legacy and, as you know, has been challenging for the nuclear industry all over the world to find appropriate solutions. And I think the very fact that we're having this commission, right, this Canadian Safety Commission right now, is and all the input on it is a good indication that we just don't have a Canadian Renewable Energy Safety Commission because we don't need one. It's evident we don't have long-term legacy radioactive products to deal with. We don't have uranium mining associated with it, and we don't have the risks that are associated with the nuclear plants. I appreciate they're very small, and Ontario's done incredibly well with controlling risk, but nevertheless, it's an ongoing concern that we don't have with wind turbines, battery storage, or solar parks, or energy efficiency.
Thank you for that, sir, and I have no further questions.
All right, Commission Member Lacroix.
Thank you for your presentation. I have no further question.
All right, Commission Member Hopwood.
Thank you for your input. Appreciate it, but I agree. I don't have any commission-related questions. Thank you.
Commission Member Remenda.
Thank you very much for your presentation. As my colleagues have stated, it was very clear and helpful, but it's outside of our mandate, so I don't have a question for you. But I thank you.
Thank you very much as well for your presentation. I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Johnson. You may have a future in politics. I would give you the closing remark, though. I'll give you the floor, sir.
Yeah, I think the problem here, I understand that the Commission is explicitly concerned about safety and not cost, but it's so clear that cost is a huge piece of the puzzle here. We have a huge problem with the cost of living right now, and to set up a legacy of extending the nuclear, it does have more. We can all agree that you people wouldn't all be here on this commission if there weren't potential risks associated with nuclear. And we have experience of not many plants having trouble, but there have been some. And it's clear that the Commission mandate is just too narrow for the times. Nuclear has been eclipsed by renewables. That's why there's hardly been any built in the last 35 years. And I worry very much about the SMRs in terms of risk. I watched quite a few of the earlier presentations, and a few of them were very concerning. I was surprised that no one could give an immediate answer to why, for example, when the BX300 reduced the amount of safety systems significantly, no one could give a very direct answer. It said it was all about the modeling, and it wasn't about, well, this is how we do it. It's just not immediately known, and it should be immediately obvious. We shouldn't have to go to GE Hitachi to find out what the answer is if you're the Nuclear Safety Commission. Secondly, if you really are worried about risk of the Ontario people, you need to be dealing with what is the least risky option for energy generation going forward from 2025. And I think we can all agree that renewables, not nuclear, are simply safer. And as Jack Gibbons pointed out, if if renewables are half the price and are safer, it's the responsibility of CNSC, just because they're safer, to be recommending them. And that would be my final comment. Thank you very much for your attention. I know I'm outvoted here by the many presentations. There's an awful lot of people who think it's the greatest thing, but it just doesn't make sense.
All right, Mr. Johnson, I really appreciate your presentation and your remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the attention. I hope you take it into consideration.
All right, thank you. We'll now take a break and reconvene at 10:40. Thank you.